Hi, I'm Jeff Stiles, and today we're going to take a look at project management and accounting in D365. In particular, we're going to be looking at what it takes to go through an entire use case for the PMA module, starting off with the project quote, moving on to creating a work breakdown structure for that quote, where we actually outline the different tasks that we're going to perform for that quote, then assigning resources to it, transferring it to a project, creating a billing rule, which is kind of like the strategy that we're going to be using for invoicing. In particular, today we're going to be focusing on a fixed price billing rule so that we can bill on percentage of a completion of the project itself. That percentage of completion on the project is going to be driven by actual timesheet entries against the project that we'll see later on and how that works with the work breakdown structure. We'll then get into more of the production side of PMA, which I don't really see a lot of people talking about too often, because PMA lends itself really well towards doing services, service contracts to complete a project. But when it comes to doing production contracts, such as if you're creating a customized product for a particular customer and you need to house that under one project in order to keep all of your finances straight and organized, that becomes a little bit more complicated. And so we'll be going through what that looks like, creating an item requirement, the kind of sales order that item requirement produces, how a product associated with that sales order drives demand in MRP, and then what it looks like in order to actually post a packing slip and get that item shipped out on that particular sales order, all under the roof of the project itself. So let's start off with the quote. So going to our module pane, coming down to project management and accounting, quotations, project quotations. Okay. So here I have my existing project quotations. Like a lot of list pages, I have my number ID, a customer account, salesperson responsible for it, and that expiration date that I was talking about before. All right. So to make a new one, I can come up here and select new. And I can either have an account type of customer or prospect. The difference here is that prospect is for when we're creating a project quotation for an entity that is not currently in our customer list, but might in the future. And so if we do choose prospect, we're going to be creating a profile as a prospect that can be later transferred to become a customer. But right now we'll just choose customer and the customer that we have in here. All right. And so at this point, we can fill in any other information we need, all right, such as the project ID. And you might be thinking, well, this is a quote for a project. Why would I be putting in a project ID at this point? Well, you can have multiple quotations for a specific project. You can have sub-projects of parent projects. And so depending on how you want to layer your projects, you might be assigning multiple quotes to a project. Okay. We also have our customer requisition and customer reference numbers like we do on the sales order to bring in any of those details from the customer themselves. All right. But for our purposes, we can just keep this pretty simple and select OK. This says, should an opportunity record be created? Since I'm creating this as a customer right now, it's asking me if I want to also create an opportunity record. It's another kind of sales and marketing record that we can have in the background here. I'm going to say no. It just helps us manage our sales better. Okay. So here I have the project quotation available to me. I've gone through and I've selected the customer. I still can update that project ID. Scrolling down here, I now have a lines page here, or excuse me, fast tab here. And on the lines, I'm actually going to be laying out the different work that we'll be doing for this project. Okay. So in order to get started there, I can either add a line here, but that's quite time consuming depending on the kind of project I'm working with. If I already have what's called a work breakdown structure created, I can go up to my action pane, project quotation, work breakdown structure. All right. And so here we have a lot of the same columns that we would have in that lines fast tab that we just pointed out, but a bit more detail and a bit more features available to us. So we can create our work breakdown structure, which again is going to be a breakdown of the different tasks we're going to be doing, along with an estimated effort in hours, start date, end date per task, a duration field for the number of days, and the number of resources available, then a role ID, and the specific resource. Okay, and we'll see how that all gets plugged in here. So essentially, the work that we'll be doing, hours, date, and who's doing it. Okay. But let's say we already have one of these templates created, because we're not going to be creating a work breakdown structure every single time we create a new project quotation. That's quite cumbersome. And so what I can do is I can come up here to import this button right here and choose a template that I already have. And here I've created one for CMO production. Selecting OK. It's asking me if I want to apply the rate card for this customer instead of the rates in the selected work breakdown structure template. That's okay. All right. And now I can come up to expand to and expand all. And here I have a lot of different tasks that I could be doing for a CMO production project. So we've already saved a lot of time by having this in here. Now there's a few things to point out here. First of all, there's a parent-child relationship between these different tasks. What I did is I went to expand to and expand it all so that we could see everything, but we can also expand it by level as well. At the top here, we have our planning task, then production, and then our put away task for the item that we actually produced. Each of these tasks also has a category associated with it. You'll notice that it has a transaction type of hour. This is indicating the kind of costing and revenue ledger transactions that we plan on entering for this particular task as we accumulate cost and then possibly bill for it in the form of an invoice. Okay, so we can have different essential costing templates for different tasks that line up with different ledger accounts. And so here I have one of those costing templates, or what we're calling categories here, as production planning, production work, and production storage. I then have that effort in hours. Okay. And we can also see that we have some roll-ups going on here for each of these parent levels. 80 and 20 make 100 for the planning. We have 7.4 to 7.17, 7.18 to 7.22, and the particular number of days that is being calculated here for these dates as well. You'll see 7.18 to 7.22. We can take a look at here, 7.18, 7.22, and you might be thinking, well, 7.18 to 7.22, that's more than 3 days. But as we take a look here, we can see 18, 21, 22, we're just using the working days. And that's because we have our default working calendar associated to this in the parameter section saying, hey, we're only going to be working on Monday to Friday, so don't count those weekend days, the 19th and 20th. As I go through these demos, I like to explain a bit about just what's going on in the background so that what's going on in front of you makes more sense. All right. If you have any questions on more of the parameters and backend that's driving this, please leave a comment and let me know, and I'll perhaps make a video on it later on. Okay. But scrolling to the right here, we also have the number of resources. We can have multiple resources on this human or machine. And then we have the role ID. Okay. The role ID is really what it says. It's the role, it's the job type that we want associated with this task. And so for these planning tasks, I have a role ID of planner available. I can go ahead and change this as needed because this is just a work breakdown structure for a quote, no big deal. If I want to change this around to operator, planner, stalker, or just general team member, I can do that. And then I have resources available in here as well that will be applicable when I actually soft book or hard book or otherwise associate particular resources, people, to this project, which we'll see later on. But as you can see right now, the staffing status is not staffed, and we also have unstaffed hours associated with each of these lines as well. Okay, we'll be getting into this a bit more later, but we also have a couple views here, scheduling and cost estimates. Right now we're just looking at scheduling, hey, how much of this, how much time is required here? But we also have cost estimates, okay? And so here, for example, expanding again, expand all, okay? We can see the different cost estimates. And once again, this is going back to that category that we saw earlier, this project category. We have the quantity in hours, the unit cost price, unit sales price. So if we actually decide to go ahead and invoice this labor, we're going to be invoicing based on the sales price. And then roll-ups per line and roll-ups per level as well. You'll see that the line property here is set to CHG. This is a user-created line property. And what this is saying is either we're going to make this line chargeable or not chargeable. There's other parameters associated with it as well. But generally, when you're using the line properties, you're using one that's either chargeable or non-chargeable, billable, non-billable, that sort of idea. With fixed price is not going to have these different lines for labor chargeable. Instead, what we're going to see later on is that as we perform the work, as we cover the hours, the effort in hours, we're going to see a percentage of completion start to develop on the project itself, right? Because there's only 180 hours here. As we plug away time in our timesheets with our different assigned resources, this number, our hours of effort consumed on the project is going to increase. The system then determines a percentage of completion based on that effort in hours, and then looks at the total contract price, which should line up to the sales amount based on the sales unit per hour, sales price per hour for our different resource tasks, and then determines how much to automatically invoice based on that percentage of completion applied to that total contract price. That's how fixed price billing works. And so this is a great thing to have for, for example, construction projects. We can start them out fixed price, recognize that revenue as we complete it based on a percentage. And then also, we won't be looking at this today, but also have a retained amount that we don't invoice on, but we track as we complete our project and then bill the customer later on. For example, if they want to retain 20% of the total payment liable to us, and at the end of the project, they want to review all of our work and make sure that it is passable, that it's satisfactory, and then finally pay us that remaining 20%. That's where that would come into play. Okay? But going back here to scheduling, one more thing I want to point out is the predecessors here. Okay? The predecessors column is similar to what you might see in routing on a production order, if you're familiar with how the operations are working. All this is saying is, hey, in order to do this task agreement, I need to have this task formula design accomplished. All right. So the predecessor here is 1.1. We know that the WBS ID here for this line is 1.1. So that we're telling the system we need formula design done before we can create the agreement. Okay. And what's important about that? Well, this predecessor value is really going to drive the dating, the task start date over here, and that task end date. And based on the number of hours applied to our calendar, we also now know the project's estimated start date and task end date, as well as the number of working days. So all I did was import this. From a template, and I already have a ton of great information that is very useful at my fingertips that I can still change as needed. All right. So let's save this and back out. Now coming back down here to the lines fast tab, you'll notice, okay, there's still nothing there. All you have to do is come up to the fast tab toolbar, generate, and then create quotation lines from WBS. If you don't have any WBS lines here in the maintain page, in the maintain action pane group, then you're not going to see this option here. So I can click create, and boom, it's pulling in all of that information that we just saw. All right. Including that unit price, the net amount, project date, so on and so forth. Just a bit of a simplified view. All right. So we've gone through, we've created our work breakdown structure now. We've generated our lines. Now we can look at our totals for this project. So once again, back in our action pane, project quotation, totals. Now we see a handy snapshot summary of what's going on here. So the subtotal amount for this contract is going to be $45,120. And the invoice amount, as you can see, is also the same amount because we don't have any discounts, other charges, sales tax, or any of that stuff applied here. For the general ledger section, we have the cost value, a margin applied, and a contribution ratio of 68%. Not bad. We also have the number of hours listed here. Okay. We can also go up and check out general and view activities. All right. So this gives us a better look at the different tasks that are going to be performed here, as well as setting any priorities on each of these tasks and the person responsible. Okay. So here, for example, for planning, I can say this is going to be associated with me. And again, production, we can say this is going to be Murray. Okay. And we can go through here and assign different responsible people to each of these different tasks. Now, there's a few different ways we can assign people to tasks. This is just one of the ways. And so I'm going to go through this real quick and get this done and show you those other ways that we can assign based on looking at an individual resource's projected capacity later on. Okay, now that I've set up the responsible fields here on the activities page, I'm going to go back. Okay, and now I can actually come up and submit if I want. But before I do that, I do just want to point out that again, you have those important dates here on the header level version, 7487 for those estimated dates. I can enter internal notes for this project as well as notes to the customer. Coming over to the header section as well, we can see more of that customer information. We can see if there's a project already associated. We can see a forecast model. This is coming in by default for us, okay, which is going to be helpful for us when it comes to budgeting, as well as more information such as the payment terms. All right. Okay. So coming up here to the action pane, workflow, submit. And this is just like any other workflow in D365. You have to have it set up. Here I just have a single approver line in the workflow. We can see now that the quotation status has been changed to submitted. Okay. If for some reason we have an issue that we need to revise on this, we can come over to, let's see here, quote, and then hit revise, which is going to be available to us after we get a response from our workflow. And so we'll go to view history and wait for this to turn over so that we can make a decision on it. Okay. So now that it's gone through and it's been submitted to our approver, that's us in this case, I have a few different options here. I can approve it. I can cancel this quotation, reject, request a change, delegate it out, or view the history again. Let's say that I want to approve it though. And here we can see that the quotation status has now changed to approved. All right. As mentioned, now we can either send that quotation or revise it. Sending that quotation is going to use our print management settings to send this to a customer if we have their email set up, or be able to print it off, create a PDF, so on and so forth. But maybe it's been approved. Later on, though, we see that, hey, there's an issue here that we need to change. Because you'll see now that add lines for the different tasks available is disabled. So let's hit revise. Okay, so that add lines is back, and we've essentially put this back into an edit mode. the quotation status is now set to revised, because all we have here are different services, different tasks that are being performed based on hours. What if we need to actually produce an item? Okay, as mentioned earlier in the introduction to this video, we can use the project management and accounting module in order to drive production. In particular, from what I've seen, customized products. Okay, so what we can do is come up to add line, transaction type. Let's choose item. And that opens up the item number field to us. We can choose our project category. It's just looking at transaction type of item. It can be whatever category you have set up here, which is once again going to be driving our ledger postings. And then the item number. Let's say this one here, P1004. All right. We can even put in the quantity that we want created. This is going to be serial tracked, so I'm just leaving that at a quantity of 1. And then it's bringing in the unit price as well. The net amount associated, project date, when we want that occurring, and the description of it, of that item out of the box. Okay. Then we can come up, I like to hit save, workflow, submit again. And so what's going to happen here is that once we turn this project quotation into a project, we're going to see this item requirement turn into an item forecast. Okay, saying, hey, we plan on having this as part of the project. We can then take that item forecast, bring it into reality as a item requirement, and the item requirement actually generates a sales order. Okay, depending on the billing rule that we're using, either time and material or fixed price, the sales order is going to have more or less functionality. If we want to invoice directly on the sales order itself, then we should be using time and material. If we can invoice alternatively through the project itself for this item, then we can be using fixed price. But fixed price makes it pretty hard in order to use that invoicing functionality on the sales order. That's just a little something that isn't obvious at first, but can cause problems later on. Okay, so I'm going to take this through the workflow and be right back. Okay, now that the quotation status has been changed to approved, we again have that send quotation and revise button available to us. Later on though, in the follow-up action pane, we're going to be using confirm, cancel, or lost quotation. So let's come over to quote and send this quotation onto our prospect or customer. Here we have the customer being pulled in. Let's say, yes, we want to print that quotation. And because we activated that toggle, we now have a few different formats available to us. We can either summarize by project category, which is going to be that costing template. That's just my term that I have for it, but category is really driving how we're posting costs and revenue to our ledger accounts. We can summarize by transaction type or a detailed quote. So let's check out that detailed quote for us. All right. And coming on down here, we can also see the lines available to us, like what we saw on our Lines Fast tab. Okay, let's do it. Awesome. Okay, so here we have the generated project quotation. Like a lot of these reports, a lot of these printouts, these are almost always customized to some extent in D365. But what we can see here is that ID, that quote ID, we have our customer information, and then we have a breakdown of the different tasks, okay, at the detail level, not summarizing them at the parent level or anything like that. We have the quantity of hours and the pricing for each of those lines. Also that category that's going to be driving that pricing and ledger account posting, but is also being used in order to just categorize the type of work that we'll be doing. All right. And you'll notice that these are in that sales amount per hour, creating that final contract price down here, $45,370 after adding in that item requirement price as well. Okay. So now that it's been sent, we have our quotation status changed to sent. We can come over here to our quotation journal. Like a lot of times when we're posting anything in D365, we have a journal available. So we can come up here to the quotation journal. Again, take a look at the line level or header level of this quote. We can use our little pop-out pane here to see any other sales quotations associated, as well as those lines. And importantly, create either a copy or original of this document for our purposes. But coming up to follow-up in the action pane, we have 3 options available to us now. Confirm, saying yes, the customer agrees that this is good to go. We can cancel this outright or say that this is a lost quotation, which is essentially just a record indicator to us saying that we did not get this prospect. All right, so let's confirm. The customer likes it. We're good to go. Again, we can create a confirmation for this. Again, we see much of the same information. We can make any changes to this in the meantime after it's been sent to the customer. And so the lines down here before it's actually confirmed, it might be a bit different. And select that OK. OK. And here we have a confirmation document. You'll notice that it looks it looks very much the same as what we saw before with the quotation we sent, because we haven't made any changes after getting feedback from the customer. Okay, now we have the transfer to project button available to us in the follow-up action pane. So instead of actually creating an entirely new project manually, which is possible and certainly doable if we don't have a quote associated, we can create the project directly from our project quotation. So again, we can create it based on an existing project or create an entirely new project. And we have a toggle here to transfer that quotation work breakdown structure with all the different tasks that we created and resources. We definitely want that. We don't want to recreate that again. So selecting next, we also have project type. There are several different project types available to us, which I'm not going to get into in this video because those are well explained elsewhere. But we only have 2 available here because these are really the only ones that are going to be customer facing. We have fixed price so that we can later on do that billing according to percentage of completion. And we have a name to put in here as well. Project contract ID, we need one of those, but we don't have one yet. So let's hit our new. And we get a lot of our excellent information in here already entered. And selecting OK. Awesome. So we have that pulled in. We have our customer information. Now let's select the next again. We have a default forecast model being pulled in, which is going to help us with our budgeting later on. We can transfer our work breakdown structure to this forecast model so that we essentially have a baseline idea of what we expected to occur with this project, which naturally helps us determine variances to our budget. Okay, and here it has a summation for us, the different lines that it's going to be producing. We have one line for the project itself. We're creating another line for our project item forecast, which, as I mentioned before, the item that we need to produce comes in as a forecast that then gets turned into an item requirement, which is effectively a sales order, a type of sales order. And then we have project hour lines as well for all those different tasks that we want to perform. Selecting finish. Would you like to make a copy of default financial dimensions from quotation line to quotation? Yep, works for me. Okay, and so now at the bottom here, we have our project ID is now filled in. Quotation status is still confirmed, but we can see a lot of lines here are now disabled on this project quote. System does not expect us to do anything else. The transfer to forecast is active. just marking that we did do that. And now I can click into our project ID and boom, now we're ready to do some work. So now let's actually assign a resource, multiple resources to this project in order to fulfill our work breakdown structure tasks. There's a couple of ways we can do that. The first way that we can do it is through the project itself on this fast tab here, project team and scheduling. We can do so by selecting add here, choosing a particular role that we want to fulfill. Once again, these roles being pulled from our work breakdown structure that we imported from the project quotation, and then the associated resource that is associated with that role that we just chose. The start date and end date, again, being pulled from that quotation based on the calendar of working days accessible. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is through what I call the project agnostic viewpoint, which is through the resource list page itself, which is accessed at project management and accounting, project resources, resources list. Here I can see those different resources with that specific role that was mentioned before and what was chosen on our work breakdown structure. To reserve them, I can come over to action pane, project resource, hard book, soft book, or reservation details. Softbook is going to not be a true confirmation of this resource's time onto a specific project. A resource can be soft booked on multiple projects and isn't as much of a confirmation as hard booking. Okay, but if we do soft book, the resource is made available on the project team of the project and can be assigned to a specific task. And so soft booking might be more useful for assigning a user to multiple projects and have them working on multiple projects on a given week. What we can do though is select reservation details in order to see this resource's entire calendar of availability. So currently I'm viewing 7/4 to 7/16. I can come up here and select soft book or hard book and assign them based on their remaining capacity, their entire full capacity, a percentage of their capacity, or just for specific hours. And if I select a particular day down here in the reservation details, I'm going to see the different assignments, hard booking and soft booking, that they have for this particular day. As I select additional days, those different lines are going to roll up into each other. And so, for example, if I want to assign this resource to these days, I first select them and then come up to soft book, remaining capacity, select the project, select OK, and now we can see this little tag associated, soft booked / requested. But they still have available hours because they're not hard booked, though we do have a soft booking reservation for that entire 8 hours. If I wanted to do a hard booking, let me clear the selections here. We can still see that we have a quotation here, quotation of reservation of soft booking from the quote itself. If I wanted to get rid of that, I could. We can also stretch out to more days to take a look at. We can come over to this day here, which has nothing. Come up to hard book, remaining capacity, same project, select OK. And now I can see that those available hours have gone to 0 and we have a hard booking for this particular project. I can then come back to my project, come down here, refresh, and it threw me back to a different project on accident there. Let's see, this one, yep. And here I can see that I'm now a team member of this project, this demo fixed price project here with my booked hours, but I'm not assigned to a particular task yet. So that's how we can do it from that perspective. But even though this gives you good visibility into what is coming down the line for this particular resources point of view, there is a more convenient way to do it, in my opinion. So we can select this line and delete, which is also going to impact their reservations here. Now we can see those reservations, that soft booking removed. And we can come down to add. We have the role that we want to choose, planner. We just want one. The start date and end date, again, coming from the project itself, which in turn is coming from the quotation, which in turn is coming from that work breakdown structure, and the resource. Now it's only going to show me resources that are associated with this role. Awesome. Okay. I also can book from calendar, which is going to take me back to that resource page view that we saw here. Create. And here we can see nice and sorted planner role, the resource, start date, end date. Okay. So now it's been added. We haven't booked any particular hours. We haven't assigned particular hours yet, but let's go up to our work breakdown structure. Scrolling to the right, I know that I have planner roles here. I can publish this work breakdown structure, which is best practice for actually assigning resources. It's saying that, hey, we're no longer changing any of these tasks here and we're ready for that. We are ready for reservations. And so I just selected that. Now I can come here, select the drop down, and now I have access to this assign automatically button, which is only going to appear if I publish this work breakdown structure. Let's say that I just have a ton of different resources here listed with particular different competencies. Assigning by automatically is going to be much more useful that way. And it's now changed to fully staffed. Unstaffed hours has reduced to 0. I can continue doing that here for these different planner lines. Assign automatically. I like to hit save, go back, and now we can see that booked hours and assigned hours match and equal 100 hours, which equals the number of hours assigned to this resource on the work breakdown structure, 80 plus 20. Okay. So that's how we start to assign our resources. And again, what's the point of assigning resources? The point is so that a resource can then go into their timesheet, choose this project and its associated tasks as work that has been performed by the resource, enter the number of hours. Those number of hours then pull in the ledger costing and revenue accounts, and then post to this project as percentage of completion performed. Because percentage of completion here is based on hours of effort consumed, we can then take that percentage of hours consumed and create an invoice proposal that automatically has calculated the recommended invoice amount based on the amount of work that has been done. Pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to go through here and assign the remaining roles, assign the remaining resources to these roles. Okay, so now as you can see, I've assigned all of the different resources to this project, and when I click in here, I can see each of the different resources. And then in order to choose the correct one associated with my role, I don't have to look through a huge list. Instead, I can just select assign automatically. Here, for example, let me back this out. And instead of selecting Shane, I'm just going to select assign automatically. And there we are. There's Shane right in there. Okay. Now let's go back here and take a look at budgeting. All right. So scrolling down here, in order to use budgeting, you're going to have to go to this fast tab here, budget and forecast, and make sure that you have use budget control active. Okay. There's a few options here worth noting in budget overrun defaults. Okay. These different ones here, disallow overruns, warn of overruns, and allow overruns, is simply looking at our costs compared to our budget and saying, hey, if we do have any overruns, are we going to disallow, warn, or allow it anyways? Okay. In order to see that project budget, we come up to plan, project budget. If I have use budget control turned off, project budget is not available to us. But I can select it, select project budget, Okay. And here from our parameters, I have a couple of forecasts pulled in. Remember, I already associated our work breakdown structure costs and projected revenue onto one of these forecasts. But I can come up to import, choose that forecast, and then OK. And here I can see my forecast. So here in the costs fast tab, broken down by category, I can see original budget, any revisions associated, and then again, the original budget for my revenues as well. And as we move through this project, we'll be able to refer to this and use it elsewhere. But in order for us to really do anything with it, we need to come up to workflow in the action pane and submit. Okay, so I'm going to wait, go through the approval here, and come right back. Okay, and now that we have an approved workflow status, we can see that total budget values have now changed from 0 to reflect the original budget plus minus any revisions associated for costs and for our revenues. Awesome. Okay, so that's a good baseline for us. We can save that and also go to action pane up here of budget, project budget balances, which we can see this in a few different places. All right, and here we have a snapshot view, our total cost, hour, and then item as well. Okay, and for our item here, we have, for hour, we have our original budget, approved budget, remaining budget. Okay, and as we go through this, we're going to see a consumed budget, for example, when we're posting our timesheets. All right, same for revenues as well. Here we can see that item revenue value associated here. If we wanted to set it up, we could have costing coming from the item as well. It's really up to you how you want to define your projects. Are we going to be having costing coming from the hours and have that calculated in that way? Or are we going to have costing tied to the item and have posting from ledgers associated with that? Or are we going to set it up a different way and just look at costing generated through the production order itself outside of the project? Okay, so there's a few different ways we can do that. Everything we're seeing here today is just an example of how I'm doing it for demo purposes, but it's certainly not the hard and fast rule. Okay, we can also group these by transaction type, category group, cost template, category so far, so on and so forth. Here, for example, is that category view that we've already seen a few times. All right. Okay. So we have our budget approved. We're going to be able to use this in project budget balances, for example. We're also going to be able to see consumption against it in the future. Let's go back to the project page now and take a look at our action pane manage and on account transactions. This is a pretty important one. Our on account transactions are really going to be the type of transactions that are derived from the project itself. For example, if we have a milestone transaction saying, hey, when we get to a certain point, we're going to bill you, that's an on-account transaction. Percentage of completion, that's another on-account transaction. A transaction, for example, charging the customer for hours performed, that's not an on-account transaction. That's coming from hours, that's coming from a timesheet document itself. If we have an invoice paid for a vendor as part of this project and we want to carry that on forward to the customer and in the form of a customer invoice, that's not an on-account transaction. And so clicking on here, we can see just those on-account transactions. And here, for example, we can see, because we're using fixed price, the total value of our project as an on-account transaction, which we're going to essentially invoice pieces of as we perform work. Okay, but that's a handy way in order to see the total value of your contract. All right. We can also, as we go on, see pending transactions, our posted transactions, for example, different invoices. When we do post invoices, we'll be able to see those in the invoice journal itself. Okay. And as we move along, we can also create more invoice proposals. Do make sure, though, that before you get too busy in your project and start actually working on it, change the status to in process. Okay. Great. Now let's take a look at how to create a billing rule. And again, the billing rules are going to drive how we are going to actually invoice the customer. So let's do that by coming up and selecting our project contract. Okay. From our project contract, which can be associated with multiple different projects, again, we can have a parent level project, sub projects or child projects embedded, and then having a billing rule, the same billing rule associated with each of them. So here we're coming into a separate page on the project contract and filling out information for the billing rule. Let's select add. And instantly we're taken to the billing rules page where we can see different line types: milestone, progress, time and material, fee, unit of delivery. Okay. Not to get into these too much today. All right. The one we're going to be able to focus on right now is progress, which is going to be that percentage of completion type. So we select progress, enter a description for this billing code. If we have a change order number, we can enter that as well. We have that contract value that we need to put in here, though, in order to tell the system, hey, this is the value that you need to multiply against when we have a percentage of the project completed. And where did we see that before? We saw that on the on-account transactions page. You can see it a few different places, but in my opinion, that's the most handy place. And so I'll just duplicate this out. Now let's looking at project contracts. Let's go back to our projects themselves. And again, coming to that on account transactions, and we can see that total here, 45,370. So coming to our billing rule, we can enter that amount. We can select the project we're working with currently. Open up the Project Fast tab. And now we're going to be able to select the available project, move it over to selected projects for this specific billing rule, saying that, hey, we're associating this project with this billing rule. Okay. And then we need to determine the categories that are going to be considered chargeable. The categories that the system is going to look at in order to determine what is actually completing work for this project. And so we do that by selecting chargeable categories. And here we can see the different categories available to us, all of transaction type hour. Okay. The system's already filtering that for us. Hour, expense, fee, and item. Okay. So I can select the three here. Why am I selecting these three? Because these are the categories that are in my work breakdown structure. Move those over to the right. Go back. And we're good to go. Now, whenever I enter time against one of those tasks in my work breakdown structure, each of those tasks has one of those categories associated with it. These different categories are then communicating that work performed to the billing rule, which then looks at the contract value, multiplies that percentage of work performed by the contract value, and boom, now you have an accurately created invoice proposal ready for you to bill out. You don't have to calculate the invoice amount yourself. Awesome. Okay. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what that timesheet looks like. So I'll save this and back out. And to get to our timesheet page, we can go here to our project management and accounting module, collapse all of these, timesheets, all timesheets. Okay. I've already posted a couple in here for a different project, but let's go up to new, choose the resource that we're going to be posting with. In order to have multiple resources associated here, you have to have them assigned to your user as a delegate. Okay. Otherwise, you're just going to see your own resource. The specific date for this timesheet, select OK. Here I can select new line. For the customer, I can enter a customer, or I can start out just right here on the project ID. Select that project ID. Why am I not seeing all the projects in the system right now? Because I'm only seeing projects that I'm booked against. Customer, name, project, all fills in appropriately. I have the different activities available for this project. I'm the planner, so I was working on formula design. Let's say it's Friday and I did 9 hours. Hitting save. I do get this warning message up here. That's okay though. All it's saying is, hey, the recorded hours differ from the defined working hours for the day. And this is related to the calendar, which is related to my work breakdown structure. I can change this to that maximum amount, hit save, and I don't get that warning message. All right. So I can come up here now. It's pretty simple. To worksheet submit. I can also print out the timesheet. And we can see that it's now in review. So I'll go through the approval process for this timesheet, and then we'll see how it's reflected on the work breakdown structure and what it does with our invoice. Okay, now this line has been approved, and because it's been approved, it's posted. If we wanted to see more ledger type information about it, we can go to our transactions in the action pane. Coming over to the right, we can see that cost price per hour and sales price per hour. Again, because we're using fixed price, even though we have a line property that tells the system to charge, we're not going to be charging for this because we're not using time and material. We're using fixed price. And so that's why we are charging based on percentage of completion. So now let's head over to our invoice proposal back on our project. I like to click into the project contract ID and then maintain up in the action pane, invoice proposal. Okay. And now we can see the invoice proposal has an invoice amount of $3,024.67. Well, where's this coming from? Let's back up. So coming over to project, plan, work breakdown structure. From scheduling, we can go to cost estimates. Scrolling to the right, again, we can see that unit cost for that task that was just performed, the unit sales price. Selecting tracking view, I can then expand out and I can see cost percent, okay, which is what we're basing our invoice on. So we currently have, for this particular line here, we have 10% of this line done, rolling up to the entire planning section. We have 8% of that done, rolling up to the entire project. We have 6.67% of the project done. Cost that has been applied has been $960. We have a remaining cost on this project, or our remaining budget, of $13,440. We then take that percentage, multiply by that current contract value, and we get that invoice amount. Pretty handy. So again, let's go back to our project contract ID, invoice proposal. The invoice amount is in there. We can adjust this invoice proposal by certain start and end dates. We can say, for example, if we want to bill month to month, we can set this to the 1st, end date to the 31st. Okay. We can choose for specific projects. It's just filtering in on our current project though automatically. Okay. And there's also a feature that I have turned on to where the system, once you enter this page, is just going to show you any available lines to you instead of only showing you filtered transactional invoice lines. Okay. Just in case, just so you don't miss anything that might be filtered out automatically. Pretty important. And so I can select this, come down and select OK. Oh, we can also see down here at the lower left a roll up of any lines that I have selected, total invoiced amount, deductions, and net. Okay. So here I have an invoice proposal that's been created. If, for example, the invoice proposal that I was working on just now had a negative net amount, I would be creating a credit note, and that credit would be reflected on the produced document sent to the customer. Okay. But here what I can do now is go up to totals in the action pane in order to review at a summary level what's going on here. All right. So here I can see that invoiced amount again. If I am invoicing on revenue, for example, with time and material or anything else, I'm going to see those listed here. But we have a pretty simple operation right now, so we're keeping it simple. Okay. So we can also go up to print, and I can get a print preview of this document. I can also format the invoice proposal, change my print management as needed. If I am formatting the invoice, then it's going to be adding or removing any included transactions on the generated invoice. So for example, if I have transactions on here that I don't want included for whatever reason, I can format that invoice before sending it out. All right. Great. So that gives us an idea of what we're doing. We can then go up and post this. Printing active, print management active, again, seeing our invoice and selecting OK. All right, and here we can see the out-of-the-box invoice with our customer information, our project information, our payment terms, and scrolling down here, we can see that rule type of based on progress, what we've invoiced to date. This is just our first one, so nothing there, and the line amount. So pretty simple, straightforward. We can always adjust this as needed, as we usually do. Okay. So coming back out now, we can see this invoice reflected in other places on the project. So coming back, for example, we can go up to Control, Invoice Control. Okay. Selecting Calculate. Now I can see against the quotation that was provided previously, the invoiced amount being impacted. All right. And the remaining amount to invoice. We can also take a look at the cash flow. So coming up again to Control, Cash Flow. Calculate again up at the top. We can see that cash inflow, our cash outflow, net cash flows, the invoiced on account amount, our cash paid for, specifically for the hours. In Manage, posted transactions, we can actually see the different transactions associated with this project that we've been working on. And so here, for example, we have that invoiced amount and the amount that's coming from the timesheet. We can come up to View, View Transaction. Okay. And we can see how it's deriving that amount. Fully invoiced. And again, we can come to invoice journal if we need to, in order to see that invoice again that we sent off. We can come up to view the copy, view the original. Let's say, for example, we need to view the copy. Here we see what we just created, but with invoice copy marked at the top. And we can dig in as needed. Okay. And last but not least, going over to the project contract one more time. Coming up to maintain and manage contract status. Again, we can see a pretty simple view of what's been going on here. We have our fixed price billing, the value of this contract, the invoiced amount to date. If we are doing any retainment on this project, the customer retained payment will be located here. The remaining amount for the project to bill and what has been completed so far. Okay. All right, so next, let's actually take a look at what it would take in order to process an item through a project. And so that's going to involve looking at the item forecast, creating an item requirement from that forecast, and then using our production process in order to create it and then ship it out from our fixed price project. Let's take a look. So let's talk about what an item requirement is doing in a project. What's the purpose? First of all, in order to see any items associated with this project, we need to go to Plan, Item Forecast. And this item forecast is pulling from that quotation we created a while ago. Okay, we can see the item, we can see the quantity, unit, and sales price. Okay, but what's the purpose of using an item requirement in a project? Well, it's really going to align manufacturing operations with project timelines, the budget, deliverables, by placing everything essentially under one roof, which is the project itself. Instead of having our ledger transactions and data associated for this production order of this item mixed up with every other production order we're creating in the system, we're able to separate out this particular item and its associated transactions in a separate house, in a different project. So the costs are going to be recorded against this project. The project production order is going to be able to still talk to MRP or planning optimization, and we can use the progress tracker for this production order as well. And so there are a couple of key prerequisite parameters that I want to talk about also before we get started. And so briefly, let's take a look at those. Going over to our PMA module, setup, project management and accounting parameters. Coming down here now to production. It's just a few here, but they're pretty important. Okay, so we have some different posting methods available to us. All right, this is how essentially production orders are going to be used in production. We have finished items. This is going to be used essentially after production order is finished. The cost is going to be posted to the project and invoicing can occur at that point. So it's really focusing on that actual finished endpoint. Consumed items, however, is only going to, only the cost of the items and time associated with a production order are going to be posted to the project and allowed for invoicing. Okay, so we essentially have just the finished item itself or what is being consumed in terms of raw materials and time effort expended on the project. We also have set subproduction to consumed. This determines if required sub-production orders are created for the main production order, if they're going to be designated as either consumed or not consumed on this project. So, for example, if we have pegged supply as one of the line types on a BOM, that's going to shoot off and create a separate production order, a sub-production order for the make item that we might be using as an item requirement on our project. If that sub-production order that's been shot off in order to support our make item, if that item has consumption against it, this is going to determine whether or not that consumption is associated with our project. Okay. All right. Great. So now that we have that out of the way, let's truck on over and check out how we're going to spawn or generate our production order. So back here at the item forecast page, we can select create item requirement. And so create item requirement is just looking at the forecast line that we have selected. We have a category associated with it that we chose during our project quotation. We have that item number, that fixed item number. Okay. Any cost price associated with it, which you can have in here. I just don't happen to have it right now. The quantity and the unit price for the sale. All right. And selecting OK, we're going to be generating a item requirement. Awesome. So backing up, still on plan, item requirements. We were just on item forecasts, and now we're on item requirements. We can see the item requirement that has been generated. And it's also generated a sales order right here. Okay. Scrolling to the right, we can see the requested receipt date. This is also based on different parameters that we have currently, but because we don't have any specific lead time or anything, and we're just generating it today, it's today's date. Selecting the sales order here, we can see a typical sales order line. Coming on down here, we can see again the item that we're going to be creating, its quantity, its unit price, just like we would normally see. Okay. How do we know though that this is related to our project and this is also an item requirement sales order? Because item requirement sales orders are a little different. For fixed price, we're not going to be able to invoice directly from the sales order. Coming down here, we can go over to project. We can see that the project is associated with this sales order as well as its category, which helps drive that those ledger transactions. And coming up to header, order type, we can see item requirements. Okay. And we have a few different ones here, but typically it would just be sales order if we're creating a normal sales order. So backing up, we have a lot of different features available to us, which is kind of like the typical functions and features that you would need in order to perform anything with a sales order. Okay, for example, when it comes to posting, having a picking list and packing slip, inventory wise, we can take a look at some hot items such as what's on hand for this. Do we need to do any registrations? For functions, we can explode it out, create a purchase order based on this item requirement. For setup, we can set that print management for later use. Okay, if we have any warehouse work generating from this, we can release it to the warehouse. Okay, we even have engineering change management for this item. All right, but for our purposes, in order to create a production order from it, a little counterintuitively, we go up to inquiries and production. All right. So we see that this is important. The action is not possible because the reservation field is set to explosion on the sales order line. In order to actually explode it out, if we do have that set up, we're going to have to change it to manual. So here we have setup, reservation, set to explosion, and we can change it to manual. Okay. Now coming to inquiries, we can explode. Oh. And in our explosion, we can see what is going to be associated with this particular item currently and how our sales order is fitting into it. But to make the production order, again, just a production. Now we have a typical production order screen presented to us with the associated BOM, route. We have our inventory dimensions, but most importantly, for our purposes, the project being associated and that posting method, which we can still change if need be. Selecting create will create a production order that is tied to our item requirement, which is tied to our project. We know it's tied because coming down here to project, we can again see that project ID linked and linked to the order. Okay. So because creating processing a production order is a little outside of the scope of this video, I'm going to go ahead and go through the steps of producing this finished good, and then we will see what we do back on the item requirement when we ship and pack it out. Okay, and here we have the production order reported as finished, status ended. We can see that even at the line level here on our list view page, we can see that project associated with it. So if we did have a lot of production orders here, we could always easily filter them based on project ID. Okay. And coming up to transactions, we can see the production order has been received. Awesome. So now we can head over back to our item requirement on our project and pack it out. And again, in order to do so, we can come up to posting, packing slip. We want that packing slip printed. Come down here to our line, update that line. Let's pick, add that picking line, confirm, issue status change to picked, come back, select OK. And there we will have picked impact fulfillment for this item requirement sales order tied to a project with all of the costing and revenue transactions associated with it tied to this specific project. Okay, and here we have the packing slip as usual. So in a sense, it's pretty standard compared to the rest of D365 with just some nuances associated with it. We do have a line status now that has changed to invoiced. Out of the box, if you're on this page for the first time, this column here can be filtered so that it's only showing line statuses that are open. If that's the case, just come here and hit clear in order to pull out any other lines associated and bring them back so that you don't freak out when they disappear after you post a packing slip. But with that, thank you for watching. We've gone through a lot of information here, and if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer in the comments section, or let me know if there's any other part of this that you would like another video on in order to better explain. But with that, my name is Jeff Stiles. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.